In August 1997, amid heavy rain and low visibility over the Western Pacific, Korean Air Flight 801 began its approach into Guam's International Airport. The Boeing 747-300 carried 254 people through rain and darkness toward a runway surrounded by jungle hills. The captain, a veteran with over 8,900 flight hours, was fatigued and disoriented. The first officer knew the glide slope was wrong. The flight engineer saw the ground closing too fast. Neither said a word forceful enough to matter. The aircraft struck Nimitz Hill. 229 people died. For decades after, the aviation world treated Korean Air as a cautionary tale, a dangerous airline from a hierarchical culture where junior officers couldn't challenge captains, an airline to avoid, a punchline in safety discussions. That perception calcified into something the industry accepted as permanent truth. Yet in 2026, Korean Air is considered one of the best airlines in the world. It completed a 1.8 trillion won acquisition of rival Asiana Airlines, creating one of the largest carriers on Earth. But here's what makes no sense. Despite all of this, Korean Air barely registers in Western aviation discourse. It doesn't appear in the breathless YouTube rankings alongside Emirates or Singapore Airlines. It doesn't generate the social media fervor of Qatar Airways or ANA. It flies more trans-Pacific wide-body routes than almost any carrier on the planet. So, how did an airline once considered the most dangerous in the sky quietly build one of the most formidable operations in global aviation? And why has almost nobody in the West noticed? To understand why Korean Air sits where it does today, we need to understand why it nearly ceased to exist 25 years ago. The Guam crash wasn't an isolated incident. In 1999, Korean Air cargo flight 8509 crashed near London Stansted, killing all 4 crew. Between 1970 and 1999, Korean Air suffered a rate of hull losses that placed it among the most dangerous airlines operating internationally. The United States Army banned its personnel from flying Korean Air. The FAA downgraded South Korea's entire aviation safety rating. The root cause wasn't mechanical, it wasn't financial, it was linguistic. Korean is a language built on hierarchical honorifics. The way a junior officer addresses a captain is fundamentally different from how a captain addresses a junior officer. In the cockpit, this created a power distance problem. First officers and flight engineers wouldn't directly contradict the captain's decisions. They would hint, they would suggest. They would use indirect phrasing that, in the critical seconds before impact, conveyed nothing close to the urgency required. In 2000, Korean Air recruited David Greenberg, a former Delta Airlines vice president of operations, and gave him an extraordinary mandate. Greenberg made English the mandatory language of the cockpit, not because English is inherently safer, but because speaking English stripped away the hierarchical grammar that was killing people. A first officer speaking English to a captain could say, "You're too low," without the cultural weight that Korean honorifics imposed. The transformation was total. Korean Air hasn't suffered a fatal accident since 1999. That's over 25 years of spotless safety operations. Korean Air has been building something remarkable. The airline had always been an industrial workhorse rather than a luxury showcase. Founded in 1962 by the South Korean government and privatized in 1969 under Hanjin Group, it launched trans-Pacific freight operations in 1971 and passenger service to Los Angeles in 1972. Cargo was never an afterthought, it was the foundation. During the pandemic, when passenger carriers worldwide hemorrhaged cash, Korean Air remained profitable. Cargo revenue in 2023 ran 58% higher than pre-pandemic 2019 levels. The airline leveraged South Korea's position as a semiconductor and e-commerce export powerhouse. This isn't glamorous, it doesn't photograph well for Instagram, but it generates cash. And what comes next is an aggressive fleet renewal that should make every competitor in the Pacific pay attention. Korean Air ordered 33 Airbus A350s, split between 27 A350-1000s and 6 A350-900s in 2024, later converting 7 A350-1000 orders to the A350F. On top of that, the record Boeing commitment for 103 jets in August 2025, including 20 777-9s, 25 787-10s, 50 737-10 MAX aircraft, and 8 777-8 freighters. This isn't a carrier maintaining its fleet, this is a carrier rebuilding itself from the airframe up, retiring aging aircraft, replacing them with the most fuel-efficient widebodies available. The significance of Korean Air's transformation isn't about fleet orders, it's about what the Asiana acquisition does to an entire region's competitive architecture. In November 2020, Korean Air initiated the acquisition of Asiana Airlines, its only full-service domestic rival. The deal took 4 years to close, requiring approval from 14 separate antitrust authorities worldwide. On December 12, 2024, Korean Air secured a 63.88% controlling stake for 1.5 trillion won. Consider the mathematics of what this creates. The merged entity now controls approximately 49% of South Korea's international passenger capacity. Include the low-cost subsidiaries Jin Air, Air Busan, and Air Seoul, and the group commands 77% of the domestic market. The world's busiest airline route, Gimpo to Jeju, carrying 14.4 million seats annually, is now 51% controlled by the combined Korean Air entity. In March 2026, the merged airline will offer over 140 weekly flights from Seoul to 13 North American cities, over 900 weekly flights across Asian destinations. This seems disproportionate for a carrier most Western travelers overlook. Airlines typically gain attention through luxury product reveals and marketing campaigns. Korean Air is doing something strategically different. It's consolidating an entire nation's aviation capacity under one operational umbrella, while simultaneously modernizing every aircraft in the fleet. You see, Korean Air doesn't attempt to compete with Emirates on opulence or Singapore Airlines on service theater. It competes on network geometry. Seoul Incheon sits in an almost perfect geographic position between North America and mainland Asia. A passenger flying from Los Angeles to Bangkok, from Seattle to Ho Chi Minh City, from Atlanta to Tokyo can route through Incheon with competitive connection times. The Delta Airlines joint venture allows the two airlines to operate as a single commercial unit across the Pacific, sharing costs and revenues on trans-Pacific routes. That partnership turns Incheon into something fundamentally equivalent to what Dubai is to Emirates or what Singapore Changi is for Singapore Airlines, a mega hub for transfer traffic. On March 11, 2025, Korean Air unveiled a new logo and livery for the first time in 41 years. The redesign simplified the traditional Taeguk symbol and emphasized Korean on the fuselage, projecting a unified national champion identity. New uniforms, updated cabin interiors with cream and gold themes, graph amity kits, and fret bedding on premium cabins. This isn't cosmetic, it's strategic signaling that the Asiana integration, with the Asiana brand scheduled for complete dissolution, represents a permanent structural change. Asiana exits Star Alliance. Its millions of frequent flyers migrate to Sky Team. Award bookings on Asiana cease for flights after December 1, 2026. An entire competing alliance loses a major Asian node. The airline is also retrofitting 11 Boeing 777-300ERs with premium economy, replacing first class on those aircraft. New Prestige Suites 2.0 debuted on the 787-10, featuring 46-inch pitch and privacy doors. Lounge expansions are underway at Incheon Terminal 2, doubling seating capacity, with new lounges planned for LAX and JFK in June 2026. These are the moves of a carrier preparing to compete at the highest tier of global aviation. Yet the execution is methodical rather than theatrical. No splashy unveilings, just systematic investment across every touchpoint, funded by cargo profits, and executed with Shaebol patience. The airline doesn't fit the Gulf carrier template of unlimited sovereign wealth funding aspirational luxury. It doesn't fit the legacy US carrier template of domestic dominance with international ambitions. It doesn't even fit the traditional Asian carrier template of service excellence as brand identity. Korean Air is something else entirely, a logistics-first conglomerate airline with a cargo backbone generating billions in stable revenue, a geographic position that rivals any hub on Earth, a freshly consolidated domestic monopoly eliminating its only full-service competitor, and a fleet renewal program that will place over hundreds of new aircraft into service across the next decade. The Delta joint venture alone gives it privileged access to the world's most valuable business travel market. Korean Air holds the structural advantage of Incheon's geography. Japanese carriers ANA and JAL connect through Narita and Haneda. Korean Air maintains a generous 33 to 34-inch seat pitch in economy when competitors have squeezed down to 31 or 32 inches. Its bibimbap has won the Mercury Award twice, achieving cult status among frequent flyers who consider it the best economy class meal in aviation. None of these individual elements would be remarkable alone. Together, they form something no other airline in the world currently replicates. A carrier simultaneously executing a mega merger, a complete fleet replacement, a brand overhaul, a product upgrade across every cabin class, and a hub consolidation strategy, all while posting record revenue and maintaining 5-star ratings. In 1997, Korean Air Flight 801 crashed into a hillside in Guam because a first officer couldn't speak directly to his captain. The airline nearly died from its own hierarchy. 29 years later, Korean Air represents something the industry has rarely seen. Not a recovery story in the conventional sense, but a complete institutional metamorphosis. The cockpit speaks English now. The fleet speaks carbon fiber and next-generation engines. The network speaks Asian, European, and North American destinations, served through a hub that sits almost equidistant between the world's two largest economies. The question isn't whether Korean Air can compete with the carriers that dominate Western aviation conversations, it's whether the rest of the industry has noticed that it already does, and has for years. The question is whether the rest of the aviation world is really paying attention. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?